Hi, thanks for joining us on a Sustainable Guys podcast. Coming to you from Dunedin, New Zealand. Tim Woods and Andrew Dine are the Sustainable Guys. Join us on a journey to discover what true sustainability is. Tim, last week you raised the discussion about sustainability percentages. I've been given some thought to what that would look like over the week. There's some content online, but rather than an individual sustainability percentage, I think an individual score as a baseline is probably a good place to start, and a societal sustainable percentage. Question one. We probably need individual sustainability scores and societal percentages, but how do you see us developing those as a standard for us to address the sustainability situation that we're in?
Yeah, that's a tough question. Like, I suppose we need to start as what is sustainability? What is sustainable? So if you look back through human history, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, we've been sustainable up until now because we're still here.
Yeah.
How did we sustain our society over the thousands of years that we've been on the planet? We didn't have plastics, we didn't have internal combustion engines, we just used natural materials that we found in the forest or wherever we happened to live. Life was very, very simple. People lived off the land. So true sustainability is probably hunter-gatherers, early farmers. You need to take out everything that we've cluttered our modern lives with to find sustainability. And fast forward to today, before I came out today, I had a bag of crisps. It was packed, 16 grams of crisps were packed in probably a multi-layer foil sealed high-tech plastic that I ripped open. I ate 20 crisps and threw it in the rubbish. Now, because it's foil, because it's got an actual layer of aluminium in the plastic, it's not recyclable.
Yeah.
You look at probably half the products that are on the supermarket shelf, those plastics have no hope of ever being recycled. And foil is a perfect example of how unsustainable we are, because putting foil into a plastic, you're actually putting aluminium into your plastic, so that you're using up precious metal.
So you couldn't even burn the plastic through a pyrolysis process, because you're then introducing aluminium into the ash that can't be used anywhere else. So,
but that's just one example. I drove here in a car that has multiple different types of plastic. We talk about recycling, but the reality is most recycled plastic ends up as pipes or sewage pipes, or it's not used the same way as a virgin plastic is. So to talk about recycling is a misnomer, because you can't recycle, like PET, your PET bottles. They can be recycled once and maybe twice, but it can't be recycled 100 times. So we have to accept that a lot of things that we just totally take for granted have no sustainable long-term future.
Would you see that as an individual score or a societal effect, or potentially both? If an individual takes out those types of plastics from their daily life, their score improves. If society finds a better way of processing those plastics, their score improves, or are we just looking at completely replacing PET plastics with some of the plant-based plastics that certain companies are working on at the moment.
Well, I think we need to think about it seriously.
Yeah.
Because if you take, let's say, I have one packet of crisps a day and a couple of yogurts and some maybe ready-made food or whatever, and multiply that by 365 days just to get how much waste I'm producing.
Yeah.
This is stuff that, if it isn't incinerated at high temperature, is going to be around in the environment for thousands of years.
Thousands of years in a landfill near a city. So
But how long can that carry on?
yeah,
How long can the next 5 generations, 10 generations, if we're all producing the same volume of plastic waste?
yeah,
You know, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and all these quite scary things that we see,
it'll be a bridge.
they're not going to
No.
get any better. And then when you look at the microplastic pollution in the sea, and now it's being found in the flesh of fish,
Yeah.
and as an apex predator, humans
Yeah.
are eating fish, and ultimately,
And fish meal is being used to feed other animals. And
but they're finding these plastic, you know, molecules virtually in every part of the planet. And the plastic doesn't break down, it gets into smaller and smaller particles,
Yeah.
but it's still there.
Yeah.
So how many beaches, you know, like if you use a lighter to light your fire, you've got your fire burning. So when you throw the lighter out, what do you do with it? 9 times out of 10 you'll probably throw it in the rubbish.
Yeah.
Even if you tried to recycle it, how could you?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
And it's interesting that I can remember when polypropylene clothes came out. It started becoming the norm, and it was kind of like, we're recycling plastic bottles into polypropylene clothes. We're wonderful people. We don't look past the next stage. The microfibers that are going out to the sea, into the waterways and stuff, are coming from washing that polypropylene sweatshirt, and it's actually causing a worse outcome than if we had have just put the bottles in the ground. So,
but to recycle something once,
yeah,
it's not sustainable.
yeah,
And as we discussed in episode 1, what's the future of mankind or humankind?
yeah,
Are we thinking 100 years, 1,000? You know, like to be a successful species, we want to be around for millions of years. So, how many millions of disposable pens?
yeah,
Yeah, like if you look at that, there's rubber, there's ABS plastic, there's a little bit of metal, there's a spring in there. There's nothing recyclable or reusable about that pen, and we'll just throw it away.
yeah.
And it may end up on the shores of a desert island or in an albatross's gullet. You know,
it may end up buried for 10,000 years, or in 1,000 years' time we have an earthquake, the land moves, some sea rushes into an old landfill, and millions of tons of plastic are liberated into the ocean. It's too long a time frame to. Yeah.
So we need to think past 2030,
Yeah.
2050.
Yeah.
These are just numbers.
Yeah.
Looking at, I mean, I like cars.
Yeah.
I actually like the internal combustion engine. I think a lot of people do.
Yeah.
But I've looked at some of the new German electric cars, you know, like the Porsche Taycan
Yeah.
or the Audi e-tron. These things cost $200,000. They're chock full of rare earth metals, minerals. The carbon footprint of a Porsche Taycan or a Tesla or any of these electric cars is mind blowing.
It seems that
That's
the-
not sustainability.
no,
Driving a Porsche electric car
yeah,
or even a Tesla is not a sustainable
y-
lifestyle option. And if you look at a Tesla, they've got a great big iPad.
yeah, yeah.
What's sustainable about
Did-
all of the devices that
the-
we take for granted in our day-to-day lives?
The private vehicles that we should be looking at, if private vehicles are the answer, but the private vehicles that we should be looking at for, I don't know, around Dunedin, do the posties have those small electric covered
Yeah,
vehicles that fit one person and go at a top speed of about 35-40 kilometres an hour? For 90% of the people living in a city, that's all you need. You're always in a car by yourself. You're only driving for 10 minutes or 5 minutes to get to the supermarket to save yourself half an hour's walk or something like that. Why do we need these big $200,000 exotic e-vehicles when a $15,000 postie vehicle would basically function at exactly the same rate, and parking is a dream with them?
It would do everything you need.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
But even that,
Yeah,
in our sustainability index,
Yeah.
and let's give ourselves a number. Let's just say 10,000 years.
yeah,
Let's be pessimistic.
yeah.
So the human race is looking ahead 10,000 years. How many generations of plastic, how many generations of batteries, how many generations of tyres that are not recyclable or not being recycled or are
Right.
just accumulating in the environment?
So if we had a postie style vehicle that
It's
that-
a transition.
yeah, but no, that had wheels made from organically derived, not and I mean plant-based rubbers, rather than petrochemical rubbers. And the hubs of the wheels were stainless steel that has a incredibly long life because it doesn't break down. And it was done in such a way that in 500 years we're still using that same wheel unless it's been damaged in an accident. We're not constantly updating and changing and
Or
improving.
the vehicle is totally modular,
yeah,
and every component can be modularly recycled
yeah,
through that high temperature pyrolysis. Or,
yeah,
but the whole structure of the vehicle has to be built about and thought about from
yeah.
every step of the manufacturing process of can that be sustainable, can it be recycled, and then
But perhaps a battery unit that initially goes in, but when hydrogen technology for small scale catches up, that the square battery unit is removed and a hydrogen unit that has the exact same footprint is plugged in, and now it becomes a hydrogen vehicle that are
maybe
known to have less.
in the long
Yeah.
term we need to be looking at 98% or 99% of all journeys are on buses
Yeah,
or on trains, which
Yeah.
although still having issues with sustainability, why do we all personally need to have a 2-ton
yeah,
piece of metal with a giant primitive internal combustion engine in the front of it to go and buy a bottle of milk in the supermarket? Like,
yeah,
we just don't think about 90% of these things. And if you go in the supermarket and just try to not pick up hundreds of items totally encapsulated in plastic.
So
There's very, very, very few.
I counted last time I went shopping, so avocados are on special, so I bought some avocados. I bought some mushrooms that came in a paper bag, and I'm just thinking through the tomatoes that I bought were in a plastic bin. I think that's it. Avocados and mushrooms, and everything else was packaged. And I okay. So the first 2 points have been covered. Now we'll move on to low carbon eating. It's a wide subject again, but what are your views, Tim, on low carbon eating?
Well, I think probably the first thing that we could all do is stop air freighting fruit, tomatoes. There's a lot of air freighted.
But I like mangoes in the middle of winter in New Zealand that have been flown in. I'm only joking.
I know.
First of all, I can't afford them. But then
like,
you just think, yeah.
Almost 12 months of the year, there's strawberries
Yeah.
that have been air freighted in from Australia, and then equally a lot of our produce is air freighted overseas. The carbon footprint of air freighted tomatoes and fruit is just phenomenal. And again, we're not thinking at all about long term. To use a precious thing like fossil fuel, which although we want to reduce, it still has.
Yeah.
We're still going to need it to support society long term.
There's a very big transitional process that
But
we need it
to
through.
waste, half a litre of oil to ship air freight my strawberries is just a complete waste of that fossilised solar energy. So that's a start. But again, it gets really, really difficult to even know what is local produce.
Especially in consumer items. So if you're buying strawberry jam, are they grown within 100 kilometres, or are they strawberries that have been on surplus in Australia that have been shipped in such a way that they can then make strawberry jam up in Auckland, and then that's put on a truck and shipped down through a multi-layered distribution system to get on the supermarket shelf way down here. So it does become a where does your food come from? Yeah.
And maybe a start would be if supermarkets actually more clearly identified produce that is local.
Yeah.
That's been produced in New Zealand. Why are we importing exotic fruits? And yes, it's great. I want a mango. I want a mango sorbet. I want
or perhaps when we have sustainable air flight, reflect the actual cost, because if you're using a hydrogen powered jet running off green hydrogen to ship product from Australia to New Zealand, that mango isn't going to be $3.50, $5.50 in the middle of winter in New Zealand. It's going to be $12.50 because the full environmental cost is included in the mango, rather than loading the atmosphere up with CO2 that no one is paying for at the moment. So
I mean, if you think of, maybe let's go back 200 years in a Western country, we grew food. There were a lot of small farms, so a lot of people basically grew their own food. If you had a bad summer, you might end up having a bad winter and not having enough food to eat. But life was very, very simple.
People joke about the meat and three veg, but the reason why it was meat and three veg is because there was only meat and three veg.
And people would harvest corn and turn it into flour, and that meat was a luxury item. I mean, one of the reasons that the traditional English Sunday meal was one of the few meals in the week that you possibly would eat meat you had things like Yorkshire puddings and
Yeah.
gravy and
To try and
a
pad
whole
out
load
a
of-
small amount.
yes.
Yep.
And meat was very much a luxury item
Yep. Yep.
200 years ago, 100 years ago.
Yep.
Now we just
Toe through it.
totally take everything for granted.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. You have a bacon butty for breakfast. You have a sandwich with ham or chicken or pork or whatever for
and
lunch,
we don't
and then you
think
have
about
meat for tea again.
where it came from.
Yeah.
I bought some cheese, nice looking blue cheese in the supermarket the other day.
Yeah.
When I got home, I just was interested in where it came from. Well, it had air freighted in from Denmark. It was an Arla
Yep.
products, blue cheese, made in Denmark.
Yeah.
Very,
Wow.
very nice.
Yes, yeah.
Very nice
I
blue
bet.
cheese.
Yeah.
But can we keep doing that
Yeah.
for 10,000
Yeah.
years?
Yeah.
Like,
And you can't.
when do we stop?
And when you're shopping, you can't pick up every product and okay, right, that's that. Oh yeah, that's yeah. It's almost, you know, the word tariff is a bad word in New Zealand, but we almost need not imported tariffs, but environmental tariffs.
Well, I mean, one thing that we've talked about, and I think we're gonna develop and explore,
Yeah.
and this is something we could offer to food companies,
Yeah.
is our sustainability mark.
Yeah.
Is that pot of jam sustainable? If you're a local producer, then your sustainability rate is going to be a lot higher than something that's been flown in from the tropics,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
you know, like even a pineapple.
Yeah.
I think the nearest place that pineapples comfortably grow is northern Queensland.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like
Sorry, I've got to shout out to the rare fruit growers in New Zealand. I follow a rare fruit growers group on Facebook, and I sit there with a long face because it's all North Auckland stuff. It's all Gisborne and warm climate, and they do grow pineapples and stuff like that, but they're not the commercial size and what most people would expect. But yeah, you're right. A pineapple in the supermarket, but again, you take for granted. I'm going to buy a pineapple. No, it's only $5 or $6 or something like that.
Mm.
It's been on a big journey to get to you.
mm,
The CO2, if you were paying for the CO2, realistically, that price would probably double.
so again,
Yeah,
I'm not against pineapples.
no, love them.
But are they something that's
Yep.
a special event? You
Yep.
know, like, and I know
Christmas on the
there's
ham.
people
Yeah.
will say, "What a pair of killjoy misery, you know, soul destroying."
They've had a good life. Why are they
But-
destroy ours? Yeah,
I think what we're trying to explore here is we're not saying that we're any better than anyone else,
No,
but we're saying
no.
that the way the system is set up
yeah,
makes it extremely hard to be sustainable.
yeah,
And so having a sustainability mark,
Yeah.
actually grading
yeah,
products, you know, even having a bit more visibility about locally made product. We live in Otago, are we eating Otago produce?
yeah,
Every little component will help reduce the carbon footprint of our diet.
yeah.
So
A lot to do with low carbon eating.
So we can talk about reducing meat, we can talk about, you know, things that clearly have a much higher environmental footprint.
yeah,
But it's more than just becoming a vegetarian or a vegan,
Yeah. yeah,
or not having a bacon butty for breakfast. It's where's it grown, how's it packaged, you know, like.
So, well, sorry. One thing I didn't know that we've mentioned hydrogen once or twice, but the way they make a lot of synthetic fertilizers is they get coal and they strip off the hydrogen, and the CO2 from the coal basically vents to the atmosphere, and then they take the hydrogen and they interact that with nitrogen to make ammonia fertilizers, to make things grow quickly. The amount of CO2 released when you make ammonia fertilizers to make food grow quick and taste good for the mass consumer market, the amount of CO2 is absolutely massive. So we've been including that in the dynamics. I don't think it was something if I probably had stopped and thought about it, then yes, it makes sense. But until you actually stop and think about it, there's a lot that you just take for granted and you hope that someone's doing the right thing. But the right thing in food
So
is the cheapest.
even if you're eating a lot of vegetables,
Yeah, ammonia fertilizer.
most
CO2.
of them will have been fertilised,
Yeah,
unless they're totally organic, which is highly unusual. And again, we can go down the organic pathway, but 7.9 billion people are
Yep.
not going to be able to live
no,
in a, you know, wool sweater kind of greeny,
Yep.
happy,
Yep.
you know, organic way, because there ain't enough land on the planet, and there'd be far too many, you know,
yeah,
pests, and we'd all start starving.
Yeah.
So, yes, we can talk about organic, but
it was the end of a lot of civilizations. Thousands of years ago, all you could do was farm organically. There were no pesticides, insecticides, and the great civilizations fell because of insect plague. That's the worst biblical thing that could happen was an insect plague. That's because they didn't have pesticides. So organic food is fantastic, but you can't feed, as you just said, our population on organic food. So,
so there's a
but there's a balance there somewhere as well, though, because there's full organic, which is full organic, and it just seems to be very black and white that there's organic and there's not organic. And if and it comes back to your point on the sustainability mark, that consumers know that organic is organic, and anything goes for anything that's not organic. If there was something that was that close to organic, but sustainable, so what you can't label it organic, but something that has reduced pesticides, has reduced ammonia fertilizer, or no ammonia fertilizer, but it's not organic, has reduced this, but it's not organic, but it is seen as a sustainable, long-term viable way of producing food. I think giving people the option to see a sustainability mark on celery, so when they look at it, they see, okay, right, this pale, limp-looking celery, that's $5 a bunch. The organic is $17 a bunch. There's stuff here that's $8 a bunch that has a sustainability mark that is something that can be continued in a sustainable way, grown in a sustainable way, that is known to be better than the cheap stuff, but doubling your price for organic is, for a lot of people, is just out of the question.
No, I think we're in a, and I think where we can help as the sustainable guys, or people can help, is there is going to be a transition.
Yep.
But we're all going to have to get used to changing our lifestyle and changing it quite fundamentally, and perhaps even educationally, how children are. I mean, there's a lot of sort of modern theory and modern thought about the way children are taught at school, but they're taught to be very afraid. I've seen them all go on their demonstrations with their big plastic placards saying there's a climate emergency,
leaving streets littered with rubbish,
while they take pictures of themselves with their smartphones that have an environmental impact that we don't even want to begin to think about. But what are they? What's the next generation? We are interested in the environment, and it's become, you know, from, I don't know, 100 years ago, when you'd you'd cut down the redwood forests in California and America. Like we saw them as these vast resources that we could take advantage of. There's a lot of little things we can do, and getting the next generation educated about actual sustainability. There's no point in them going off. They have their demonstration and then they peel open their packet of crisps in the beautiful 9-layer foil-lined plastic film that's going to, that if it happens to wash down a drain and end up in the harbour, will be there for the next 10,000 years.
Though what choices do they have? I suppose they could take an apple along rather than a bag of potato crisps. But then when we've just looked at the potential,
do they know whether that apple was air freighted in from
overseas?
Exactly.
Yeah. So you've got bigger or choice when it comes to potentially eating sustainably. So again, it's.
But I think if we can start to do things step by step, so as an example of a sustainable or more sustainable, starch-based plastics are widely available. They're totally compostable. In fact, in some cases, you could actually eat them. They cost a lot more. And they can be more challenging to produce. But they have no environmental impact because they'll break down. And I'm not talking about the plastics that have molecules in them that help them break down into dust. I'm talking about
actual
starch-based.
I saw one built from plastics built from avocado stones. They were dumping thousands of tons of avocado stones, and they developed a process that they could make a starch-based plastic or an oil-based plastic from the oily stone of an avocado, and they were.
I suppose the other question is, how do we encourage? So, over the years, I've worked in a number of food-based businesses, and everyone's an environmentalist until the price goes up 1%. And literally, trying to sell a price increase of 10% or 20% because we're now environmental. All the doors shut, we don't want, yes, we're all environmentalists until it costs $1. So clearly, plastics are going to have to be heavily taxed.
And that's where we're going to have to leave it this week due to technical difficulties. The cameras and microphones didn't record much past Tim saying about taxing. So thanks for joining us this week. We'll pick up the conversation next week. And don't forget to visit sustainableguys.com to stay up to date with our journey. Proudly sponsored by Sustainable Hydrogen New Zealand Limited, building sustainable green hydrogen hubs. With sustainable hydrogen, it's green energy or nothing. Thanks for joining the Sustainable Guys podcast series. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with Sustainable Guys events. If you would like to discuss anything in future casts, please comment below or fill in the form at sustainableguys.com.